Hello. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, news spread that struck terror into the hearts of the residents of the San Francisco Bay Area. A series of brutal crimes by an unknown serial killer who murdered his victims in cold blood for no apparent reason, with no common links between them. He gave himself the name Zodiac and created a distinctive symbol for himself. He played a psychological game with the police and the press through provocative letters in which he confessed to his crimes, threatened new ones, and always ended his messages with incomprehensible ciphers, challenging the police and the public to decode them. Despite confessing to 37 murders, the police were only able to confirm 5. The case of the Zodiac Killer turned into one of the most complex and enigmatic criminal mysteries in history. Welcome, and today I'm going to tell you the story of the Zodiac Killer. On June 4, 1963, on graduation day at Lompoc High School, the students agreed to gather at a location to celebrate. All except for one student, an 18-year-old named Robert Domingos, who decided to take his classmate, 17-year-old Linda Edwards, to celebrate on a nearby beach. They were supposed to spend the day there, and then Robert would drive Linda home. But 1 hour turned into another. The day ended, and Wednesday arrived. But Robert and Linda still hadn't returned. Robert's father grew worried and went to the beach, and there he made a shocking discovery. The two were murdered, their bodies lying inside an abandoned shack on the shore. He quickly called the police, who arrived and discovered that the killer had tied the two with ropes by their hands, shot Robert 11 times, and Linda 9 times. The weapon used was a .22 caliber Winchester Western Super X rifle. The killer then dragged their bodies inside the shack and tried to set them on fire, but failed because the matches were old, so he left them and fled. What was strange was that the forensic investigation confirmed there were no fingerprints or any evidence of the perpetrator. There was no attempt at robbery or sexual assault, nor did the victims have any known enemies. There was simply no motive for the crime that had occurred. It was as if the killer was just passing by, saw two people sitting there, and decided to kill them. 3 years after this tragic incident, on October 30th, 1966, an 18-year-old student named Sherry Jo Bates left her home in Riverside, California, between 4:30 and 5 p.m. She left a note for her father, who was at work, saying she was going to the university library to finish some research. She took her car and drove there. At 10 p.m., her father returned home, read her note, and waited for her to come back. But the time grew late, past midnight, and Sherry still hadn't returned, even though the library closes at 9. When it reached 5:30 in the morning, her father decided to call the police and report her missing. Around the same time, the Riverside Police Department received a report from a groundskeeper that he had found the body of a young woman on a dirt path near the Riverside City College Library parking lot. The police immediately went to the scene. There, they discovered that the body, which was lying between two abandoned houses, was that of the missing Sherry Jo Bates. The killer had stabbed her multiple times in the chest, neck, and shoulder area with a knife about 7 centimeters long. Next to her body was her purse, containing all her personal belongings, including her wallet and money. So again, the crime was not for robbery. Furthermore, her car was still in the library's parking lot. The perpetrator wasn't trying to steal money or even the car. Investigators speculated that the killer somehow managed to disable Cherie's car and then convinced her that he would give her a ride. After she left with him and they were a short distance from the parking lot, he carried out his crime. The only silver lining in the incident was that she had likely sensed the danger before being killed and fought back against her attacker, managing to injure him. This was deduced from the skin and brown hair they found under her fingernails. Moreover, she had managed to tear off his watch, which fell from his wrist without him noticing. This helped investigators discover another clue next to the watch: the killer's boot prints. Strangely, they were from military-issue boots, sold only at military outlets to people with a military ID. But despite the evidence, the investigation still couldn't identify the real perpetrator. Suspicion centered around a young man who had a past relationship with Cherie, and investigators thought their breakup might have been the motive. However, the evidence found at the crime scene did not match this young man's profile at all. Nevertheless, he was not removed from the list of suspects and remained under surveillance and investigation. A month after the incident, on November 29th, two identical typed letters from an anonymous person arrived, one for the police department and the other for the * Riverside Press Enterprise * newspaper. The title of both letters was The Confession. The letter contained precise details of the incident that only the killer and the investigators would know. In the letter, he mocked the murdered girl and insisted he wasn't sick, just insane. The next day, another handwritten letter arrived for the police, the press, and Cherie's father. The letter said, "Bates had to die. There will be more," and was signed at the end with the letter Z or the number 2. 6 months later, a library custodian discovered a morbid poem about the pleasure of killing carved into one of the wooden desks in the library. Of course, investigators took the poem and added it to the rest of the evidence. More than a year passed until December 20th, 1968, just 5 days before Christmas. On this day, 17-year-old David Faraday decided to visit the family of his classmate, Betty Lou Jensen, and ask for their permission to take their daughter to a concert and bring her back by 11 p.m. David and Betty agreed that they wouldn't go to a concert but would instead take the car and drive to Lake Herman Road to spend the day together. The two executed their plan, but at 11:20 p.m. that same night, a person driving by noticed a car parked in the middle of the road with its doors open and windows shattered. When he got out to see why the car was parked like that, he was shocked to find Faraday lying next to the car, shot in the head, and Betty having been shot 5 times in the back, lying in a pool of her own blood. When the police arrived and began their investigation, they concluded that the killer had fired shots at the car itself to scare the two victims and force them to get out. As Faraday was trying to get out of the car, one of the bullets hit him in the head. Betty panicked and tried to run away, at which point the killer shot her in the back. What was crucial was that when they analyzed the shell casings, they discovered the killer had used a .22 caliber Winchester Western Super X, the same weapon used to kill the first 2 victims. This incident was also not for robbery or sexual assault, but due to the different locations and the long time between the 2 incidents, no one connected them at the time, and this case was also filed against an unknown perpetrator. 6 months passed, and July 4th, 1969, arrived. On this day, Darlene Farron, a 22-year-old wife and mother, left her job at a well-known restaurant in California. She then met up with a 19-year-old named Michael Mageau. The two then drove off and parked in the Blue Rock Springs parking lot. This was around midnight. Suddenly, they saw a car enter the parking lot and a man got out holding a flashlight and shining the light on them. Step by step, he walked towards them. At first, they thought he was a police officer, but they were shocked when the person pulled out a 9mm pistol and, without warning, fired 5 shots at them, then left. Michael Mageau was still conscious at the time and began to groan from the intense pain. The person heard him, returned, and fired 2 more shots at each of them before completely disappearing from the crime scene. But luckily for Michael, all the bullets hit his jaw, shoulder, and leg, and he remained alive, unlike Darlene, who was hit in vital areas, leading to her death. When the police arrived at the scene, Mageau was unconscious and was immediately transferred to intensive care. Initially, all suspicion pointed towards Darlene's husband, with the motive being marital infidelity. But investigations proved that her husband was at his shift at a California restaurant at that time, had not left his job, and knew nothing about the incident. A few hours into the investigation, a call came from a public payphone to the police department. An unknown person, speaking in a low voice, said, "I want to report a murder. About 17 kilometers east of Columbus Parkway, you'll find kids in a brown car shot with a 9mm Luger. I killed them." He added, "I also killed those kids last year." Then hung up the phone, and no one could trace him. 27 full days passed, and then a letter arrived at 3 different newspapers: Vallejo Times-Herald, San Francisco Chronicle, San Francisco Examiner. The 3 letters were postmarked and handwritten by an unknown person claiming to be responsible for the murder that happened a few days ago and also responsible for the murder that happened before Christmas. To prove his words, he gave them details about the 2 crimes that only the investigators would know, such as the number of bullets, the type of weapon used, its appearance, and the color of the victim's clothes. He even described how they were positioned on the ground. He threatened to kill more people if they didn't publish his words on the front page by August 1st. He ended his message with a drawing of a circle with 2 intersecting lines, the meaning of which no one understood. He also sent 3 ciphers with strange symbols, challenging the police and the readers that if they could decode them, they would know who he was. The police, despite their astonishment at the letters, asked him to send more details to confirm that he was the actual killer. Indeed, on August 4th, he sent a 3-page letter to the examiner responding to the police's request. He first mocked them, and then began to recount very precise details about the latest crime involving Michael Mago and Darlene. He expressed his displeasure with the examiner specifically because they published his letters on the 4th page instead of the front page as he had requested. In this letter, he used the same symbol he had used before, and this time he referred to himself as the Zodiac ***. This was the first time he used a pseudonym. On August 8th, news reached the police that a high school teacher named Donald Hardin, with the help of his wife Betty, had managed to decode the Zodiac cipher that had been published in the newspapers. He said the cipher read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all to kill. Something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise and all the I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife." At that point, the police were certain that the cipher Zodiac was sending would never contain explicit information about him, as he had claimed. During this time, Majo, who was hospitalized, began to regain consciousness and started to recount the details of the incident. He told investigators that the person who attacked them was in his late 20s or early 30s, white, with brown hair and a round face, slightly heavy-set and about 170 centimeters tall. But of course, these characteristics were very general, and they couldn't get any closer to the perpetrator. Days passed until we reached September 27th, 1969. On this day, 2 college students, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, were spending the day on the shore of Lake Berryessa, about 50 kilometers from Napa County, California. In the middle of the day, they noticed a man acting strangely, as if he were watching them from behind the trees. He was white, a bit heavy-set, and wearing glasses. A little later, they were startled to see him standing in front of them, his head covered with a long hood, and on his chest was a drawing of a circle with 2 intersecting lines, just like the one Zodiac sent in his letters. Around his waist was a belt with a knife, and in his hand was a gun pointed at them. He told them to give him all their money and the car keys. He told them, "I am an escaped convict. I killed a guard and I'm heading to Mexico." At that point, Brian tried to negotiate with him to avoid any harm and tried to convince him to let him help. But the person was agitated and refused to negotiate. He then pulled out a clothesline he had hidden in his belt and told Cecilia to tie up Brian. After she finished, he pulled out another rope and tied her up as well. "With you." Suddenly, without any warning, he pulled out the knife and told them, "It's time for you to die." He stabbed Brian 6 times in the back and Cecilia 10 times. He then went to Brian's car and wrote on it with a pen the dates of the 2 previous incidents, along with the date of the new incident, September 27th. Below it, he wrote the weapon used. By knife. He carved his symbol clearly on the car's body and left them. At 7:40 p.m., a call came from a public payphone to the Napa Police Department. An unknown person reported the murder, its exact location, and a description of Brian's car. Before hanging up, he told them, "I am the killer." They quickly arrived at the shore and found Brian and Cecilia still alive. They transported them to the hospital, but Cecilia died there. However, They saved Brian, and he was the one who told them the details of the incident. During the investigation, they discovered clear military boot prints, just like the ones they had found before. From their depth in the sand, it was clear that the criminal was indeed heavy, matching the description. This led investigators to connect all these incidents to each other. 2 weeks passed, and on October 11th, the Zodiac struck again, but this time in the heart of San Francisco. A taxi driver named Paul Stein picked up a passenger who asked to be taken to the intersection of Washington and Maple Streets in Presidio Heights. But when they arrived, the passenger shot him in the head. 3 teenagers who lived across the street saw the incident. They described a heavy-set man sitting in the front seat next to the driver, who was slumped over the steering wheel, covered in blood. The man next to him was taking his wallet and car keys and trying to cut a piece of his shirt. After cutting it, he soaked it in the victim's blood, folded it, put it in his pocket, and began to wipe his fingerprints from the car, then left. Of course, as soon as they recovered from the shock, they called the police and reported what they had seen. Their description was that he wore glasses and was heavy-set, but because it was dark, they couldn't make out his features clearly. So instead of sticking to what they had said, they embellished it and said he was black. Since at that time, any trouble was immediately blamed on black people. Indeed, the police arrived quickly at the scene and began to patrol the area. They actually found a heavy-set man wearing glasses walking on foot near the crime scene, but they let him go because he was white. After investigations and lifting fingerprints, they couldn't reach any conclusion because of the numerous fingerprints in the car, as it was a taxi and many people rode in it. The case was registered as a routine robbery. This move apparently provoked the Zodiac, and he felt they had underestimated him. So he sent a letter 2 days after the incident to the Chronicle newspaper, claiming responsibility for the murder of the taxi driver. He also sent with the letter the piece of the shirt he had cut, stained with the victim's blood. In the letter, he mocked the police's failure to identify him and told them, "I was very close to the crime scene. If you had searched properly, you would have found me among the trees." He threatened to blow up a school bus full of students one day and stamped the letter with fingerprints that no one has been able to identify to this day. On November 8th, he sent another piece of the shirt to the press along with a greeting card as a form of provocation, and with them, a cipher consisting of 340 symbols and a threat to kill more victims. The very next day, on November 9th, he sent the longest letter in his criminal history. 7 pages in which he mocked the police as usual and confessed that he was the person the police officers had met at the time of the taxi incident and let go. He also included in the letter a diagram of a bomb. After that, he completely disappeared for more than a month. On December 20th, he sent another letter, but this time to a famous lawyer named Melvin Belly, telling him, "I can't control myself. I'm afraid I'll kill again. This time it will be the 9th or 10th victim. The children are still safe because I haven't finished the bomb yet, and it will take me a long time. If I don't kill someone now, I'll have enough time to finish building it. Please help me." At that time, Melvin contacted the police and agreed with them that he would try to draw him out until they could catch him. But the Zodiac never sent him any more letters. On March 22, 1970, 22-year-old Kathleen Johns was driving with her infant daughter, Jennifer. They were going to visit her mother in Northern California. While she was driving on the highway, a car appeared behind her and kept flashing its lights and honking until she slowed down. The person driving the car approached her and told her there was a problem with her right tire and that he could help. Indeed, both cars pulled over, and an elegant, slightly heavy-set man wearing glasses got out of the car with his own tools. He began to remove the tire and install the spare. He said goodbye to Kathleen and got back into his car. But after she drove a short distance, the tire came completely off, and she was forced to stop in a deserted area. The same person stopped for her again and offered to drive her in his car to the nearest gas station. Kathleen was 7 months pregnant at the time and couldn't walk that entire distance. It was also starting to get dark. So, Kathleen agreed and got in the car with him. Throughout the ride, Kathleen was wary of him. He would repeatedly speed up the car excessively or slow it down drastically. They passed 2 gas stations, and he refused to stop, claiming that those stations didn't have the services she needed. Little by little, Kathleen became suspicious and felt that something was wrong. She waited for him to slow down one time, took her daughter in her arms, and jumped out of the car into a slope full of trees. As she was escaping, she noticed that he had stopped his car, got out, and stood looking at her for a while, then calmly returned to his car and disappeared completely. At that point, Kathleen met someone else on the road who noticed she was terrified and took her to the nearest police station. There, she described the person she had met and identified him from the composite sketch of the Zodiac, confirming that he was the one who was with her in the car. When they went to retrieve her car, they found it completely burned. They suspected that the Zodiac was the one who did it. A few days after the incident, an explosion occurred at a police station. They accused the Zodiac of this as well. But on April 20th, a letter to the Chronicle newspaper cleared him of responsibility for that explosion. He said in it that he had planned to blow up the school bus as he had told them, but the bomb had malfunctioned due to the rain. On April 28th, he sent them another letter asking them to publish his bomb-making plans. He told them that the residents of the San Francisco Bay Area must all wear pins with his symbol on them. On June 26th, he sent another letter with a map of the San Francisco area and told them that he had killed more victims that the police couldn't find. On July 24th, he sent a letter complaining that people hadn't listened and hadn't worn the symbol. In the same letter, he stated that he was responsible for the failed kidnapping attempt of the mother and her daughter. In May 1970, a woman named Donna Lass disappeared. Donna had been working at the Letterman Hospital, near the site of the taxi driver murder, but she then moved for no apparent reason to work at a hotel in the Lake Tahoe area. The day before she disappeared, a strange number called her employer at 1:50 a.m. and told him that Donna wouldn't be able to come to work anymore because she had left town for family reasons, even though her car was parked next to her house and hadn't moved. After investigations, it turned out that she had no family emergencies whatsoever. To this day, no one knows where she is or what happened to her. But because the Zodiac, in his last few messages, had sent a postcard with an advertisement for residential apartments in Lake Tahoe, investigators linked her disappearance to the Zodiac as well. Although this was the last recorded incident where the Zodiac was a suspect, he continued to send letters, insisting that his victim count was rising until it reached 37. On March 13, 1971, he officially confessed in one of his letters that he was the one who had killed Cheri Jo Bates, the library victim, in 1966. His strange letters and ciphers continued to be sent from time to time until 1974, after which all news of him ceased, without anyone ever discovering who he was. Due to the many complexities that filled the Zodiac case, the number of suspects reached over 2,500 people. But of course, among them were a few who were more suspected than the rest. The first and most suspected person was Arthur Lee Allen ***. This was due to the many shared characteristics between him and the Zodiac Killer, such as his heavy-set build, round face, brown hair, and white skin. In addition, he was a former member of the U.S. Navy, and one of his friends confirmed that he had seen him wearing military boots more than once. He also owned a Zodiac brand wristwatch with a symbol inside it similar to the one the killer sent. On one occasion, he told his friend that he was writing a novel about a serial killer who kills his victims and tells the police the details of his crimes. He also lived near most of the locations where the confirmed Zodiac crimes occurred. Many people confirmed that his behavior was erratic and that he caused trouble wherever he went. After finishing his service in the Navy, he worked as a high school teacher and was fired between 1962 and 1963. The reason for his dismissal was that they found a loaded gun in his car. This was the period when the first Zodiac incident began. After being fired from that school, he worked at another school called Vallejo Springs and was fired again in 1968. His colleagues said he was an alcoholic. What increased suspicion about him even more was that while he was working at the school, he rarely took a day off. The only day they remember him taking a sick day was the day after the murder of the victim, Cheri Jo Bates, the only victim with whom the Zodiac had a physical struggle and was likely injured. In addition, the victims Betty Lou and Faraday, who were killed in 1968, were murdered just 7 minutes away from Allen's home. Darlene and Michael Mageau, who were also attacked in 1969, were just 4 minutes from his house. Furthermore, after the stabbing incident of Brian and Cecilia in 1969, people said they saw Allen with a bloody knife, but when they asked him about it, he told them he had been killing chickens. After a period of Zodiac's crimes, a man named Ralph Spinelli came forward and informed the police that he knew Allen, and that Allen had told him that he was the Zodiac Killer, and that he was going to kill a taxi driver in San Francisco. But the police department that received the report didn't pay attention to it until the crime actually happened. When the police investigated Allen in 1971, the Zodiac letters stopped for 2.5 years. The period when the letters stopped completely, in 1974, was the same period when Allen was imprisoned for child molestation. In 1992, the year Allen died, the police went to Michael Mageau, the survivor who had described his attacker's features, and showed him a picture of Allen. As soon as he saw it, he shouted, "That's the man who shot at me that night. Why didn't they take this picture during the investigations and show it to me?" We don't know. But despite all the evidence, the fingerprints, skin, hair, and handwriting of the Zodiac did not match Allen's. Therefore, they couldn't prove whether he was the Zodiac or not. Another person who was more suspected than others of being the Zodiac was Richard Gaikowski the editor of the Good Times newspaper, who was interested in publishing news and crimes of the Zodiac. What pointed the finger of blame at him was the strong resemblance between him and the composite sketch of the killer. In addition, the headquarters of the newspaper he managed was just 1 kilometer away from where the taxi driver was killed. Before becoming the newspaper's editor, Richard worked as a doctor in the Army, and the way the driver's shirt was torn was a common practice taught to medics in the field, especially in times of war, to be used as a bandage for wounds. This is not a common practice among the general public. The only day of the week the Zodiac never sent letters before was Wednesday, which is the busiest day at the newspaper. And Richard would not be free all day. There was also a great similarity between his handwriting and the killer's. In addition, there were some names that were frequently repeated in the Zodiac ciphers. RG, GY, GYK, all of which could be abbreviations of his name. Furthermore, some people reported seeing him at the funerals of some of the victims, even though he had no connection to them. Other people also noticed that his behavior was not right, and he was admitted to a mental hospital in 1974, the same year the Zodiac letters stopped. But again, investigations confirmed that neither his fingerprints nor his hair matched the samples the police had. Therefore, he was also ruled out, just like Allen. Thus, the true identity of the Zodiac Killer and his ciphers remains an unsolved mystery to this day. And with that, we reach the end of the story. I'm waiting for your opinions, and if you have a story you want us to tell, write it in the comments. The idea that gets the most interaction I will work on, God willing. Show me your support now with a subscription, a like, a comment, and all that good stuff. Share the video with anyone you think will like it. I'll see you next time with a story even more thrilling than the last. Peace.